Warning, paying off your debt might be a huge mistake. Now, paying off debt might sound smart, and many people will try to convince you that it is. However, it could be the very thing keeping you broke and from making millions of dollars in your own life right now. So let's talk about this. We've always been taught that to keep, if we're gonna save our money, pay off our debt, be debt-free and have it all, right? Here's the problem. My own father, who was really that post-depression mentality, he was all about penny pinching, and by the way, I was a penny pincher myself. But what woke me up was when I was in my late 20s, my dad, when I was a financial advisor, asked me, he says, Chris, will you sit down with me and help me be able to retire? So I sit down with my dad and I see all of his finances. I see that, wow, good job, Dad. You paid off your house and you're totally debt free and you've got money in your 401k. You should be the poster child of what I teach here as a financial advisor. In fact, this is all I've been teaching for the last 4 years is you are my poster child. And then I looked at his numbers again. I said, Dad, if you want to retire today, you're going to have to die in about 5 or 6 years because despite all the saving, all the hard work you've done, it's just not enough. And I didn't have an answer of how to help him out. And in fact, when he started asking me, he's like, well, what are my options? I said, I don't know. Like, you got your 401k, but it's locked up at your company, and who knows if the market goes up or down. I said, the only thing you got is you got this house that's paid off free and clear. I mean, you could cash out, refinance it, but then we have to put it in some place where you make more money than that. I'm like, I don't know if that will really work or not. I'm kind of scared, so I didn't do it, which is good because you should not use debt to put into the stock market. That's, by the way, mutual funds, they make you sign a waiver saying you didn't borrow money to put in mutual funds because that's what people did in the Great Depression, which of course led to a bigger crash during the Great Depression. So we don't recommend that. But here's what I realized is that this debt-free lifestyle, right? Trying to be debt-free, even though he had reduced his cost, it wasn't enough if he didn't have enough saved up. Even though he had savings, hundreds of thousands of dollars saved up in his 401k, it just wasn't enough if he didn't want to lose money because, again, market ups and downs make it risky. So what do you do? Like, what about this debt thing? Now, I have a friend named Prim. You might have seen his videos on social media.
We're in $25 million worth of debt, which means exactly what you think. We owe banks $25 million.
He brags all the time. He says, I've got $30 million of debt. And he brags about it, right? He's like, and I'm proud of it. And he's like, here's why. Why? Because he's got $50 million of assets and $30 million of mortgages. So what he says is, he's like, I've leveraged debt because what did he do? He put very little down payments on these properties. And these properties, of course, were able to appreciate and grow. They also paid him cash flow in the meantime. And so, yes, he's got $30 million of debt if you look at the balance sheet of $30 million of loans, but he doesn't really have debt. Debt is just negative equity, right? It's negative equity, which means is if you're upside down on something, for example, you buy a car, say you buy a car for $50,000, but it's worth $40,000, you're in debt $10,000. If you were to sell it back to the dealership, you'd have $10,000 of debt to pay back. That's debt. Debt is negative equity. Now, if you have a car you bought for $50,000, but it's worth $60,000, you now have $10,000 of equity. Equity and debt are the opposite. So in Sam's case, he's got $50 million of assets, $30 million of liabilities or loans, which means he has $20 million of equity. This guy is technically debt-free. Yet people will always say, oh, he's heavy in debt. That's horrible. And by the way, he makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a month off of those assets. Hundreds of thousands a month off those assets. Let me ask you this question. If you knew with very little money out of pocket, right, that you were able to build up this big portfolio that has $20 million of equity, which basically makes you a multi-decamillionaire, and it produces literally 6 figures a month of passive income, would you be worried? Sadly, some people would be. And so this is why so many people look at this and say, oh my gosh, like, I just can't do this. I can't have debt. Debt is bad. Just so you know, the only people that teach you that debt is bad are the banks. And the reason they teach you that, even though you think that would not make sense, I know somebody's going to argue with me on this, banks do teach you this. I know because I work for mortgage companies who also teach the same things. They would teach you to pay it off faster. Why? Because banks can do something that you technically can do too, just in a different way. Understand what banks do is this. Banks will take your money. So every dollar you put into your savings is debt to them. Did you realize this? Because they're paying you interest, aren't they? They're in debt to you whenever you put money into your savings account. Now, you may not see it that way because you see it as your equity, but they have debt. They're paying you interest. Have you ever had the bank call you up and say, hey, you know what? I love that you've been such a faithful client of ours for so many years, but you know what? I just watched the Dave Ramsey show and I just realized I'm in debt. I got to pay off all my debt, and so I'm paying you your savings back. Take it back, please. No, I'm good. Like, notice I got the old phones. I don't have the new, cell phones. But it's like, no, I'm good. Like, I like it, your money. Keep paying me interest. They're like, nope, we don't like debt. We're paying your money back. We're closing your accounts. Click. Never has a bank said that. Well, okay, I can't say never, but you will not hear banks tell that to you on a normal day, will you? And the reason is because they love debt. They take on debt because they know paying the interest to you, they now have the ability to loan out more money. And they don't only have the ability to loan out money. Say you put money at $10,000 inside your savings account, they don't just have $10,000 they can use. No, they actually have the ability to loan out 10 times more. So if you give them $10,000, you let it set it and forget it inside that little bank account, they now have $100,000 they can make interest off of because of you. So that means they're going to make money. So let's just say they make 10% interest on that $100,000 now, they're making $10,000 a year. They're literally making money off of nothing, right? So if they pay you a whopping 1% a year in savings, the $100, that $100 of interest that they're paying, that debt they're paying, makes them $10,000 a year. Do you think they give a crap about having debt? Not at all. That's what wise stewards do. This is what wise investors know how to do. Think about from your standpoint now. Instead for you, what if you were to do the same thing? Oh wait, you can. Have you ever bought a house with a 3.5% or a 5 or 10% down payment or a 20% down payment? You've done this, right? Now you may not be able to take people's money in savings and go and just make money off of it like that, although you could do it with the bank. What if you took money from the bank, right? You could use that money to leverage it. So for example, when I buy a property, of course, investment properties, the minimum down payment is 20%. Well, when I take that 20% down payment I put on my house, I get an 80% mortgage from the company. Do I stress about it? Not at all. Because why? I know that my payments are going to at least pay for the mortgage payment and then some. But on top of that, here's what happens. Say this was a $100,000 property I bought. I know that's dirt cheap, but let's just use easy numbers. I put $20,000 down. They came in with their other $80,000 on top. Now, what if that investment property appreciates 10%? Well, 10% on $100,000 is $10,000. It's now worth $110,000. Now, you might say, oh, 10%. You made 10%, Chris. No, I didn't. Because remember, I only invested $20,000 down. That $20,000 and compared to the $10,000 appreciation means I made 5 times as much, because remember, I did 1/5 of that as a down payment. So that means I can make 5 times the leverage when it appreciates. So that means my $20,000 actually made 50% return on just the appreciation alone, not even counting the cash flow and everything else. This is why I've had properties for the last 7 or 8 years that have literally returned me hundreds of percent a year, because between the cash flow and the fact that they pay down my mortgage balance, the renters do, not me, and because there's appreciation, I make way, way more money than ever I get in the stock market. That's the same thing that Sam Prim did, and that's the same thing you can do as well to create more leverage and become like the bank. Is debt really evil? No. Is debt bad if you use it improperly? Yeah. If you start running up credit cards, you can't afford to make the payments, that's a bad thing, right? If you get into excessive debt and consumer debt, that's one thing. But producer debt, right, investor type of debt, now that's something that can create a lot of wealth for you very fast. If I could go back in time, I wish I could have told my younger, penny pinching saver, no debt self to do that very same thing. I could have easily had millions of dollars more of assets and real estate and wealth than I have today if I had just followed this one simple trick about debt. If you want to find more strategies that you can figure out how could I take that debt and create good, solid passive income that I can count on, subscribe to our Money Ripples with Chris Miles channel right now.